Hi, I'm Karen Rice and thank you for tuning in to my watercolour channel and my latest video, Must Have Watercolour Materials. This video is designed for those of you that follow along on my watercolour tutorials and would like to know more about the materials that I use, but also if you're a beginner and starting out in watercolour painting, this video will be a useful guide for you when choosing which materials to buy, but also the materials that you may already have lurking around your house. So let's get started. So I've actually put all the materials I kind of use here, and the first one, one of the most important ones, is the water. So any sort of pot will do, a jam jar, anything like that around your house, you know, you can recycle and use it for your watercolour painting. The next item you will need is some kitchen towel. I use this quite a lot. It's very useful for mopping up and even using it for techniques. So again, it's something you can find around the house and don't need to buy it from a specialist art shop. The next item is salt. I've actually mixed up sea salt and table salt here. You can use either. I usually keep it in a little box and it is so useful for watercolour painting. I use it to create lots of texture, to create wildflowers, and I sprinkle it on damp paint, let it dry, and it soaks up the watercolour paint and creates the most marvellous effects. And I use that a lot, as I say, in my tutorials. The next thing I use is a sponge. Any sponge will do. I use a lot of natural sponges. I bought them on holidays, but you can get them in the local pharmacy. And what I do with those is I wet them, wring all the water out, and then I use quite creamy paint and print with them basically, and it creates lots of texture. It's wonderful for creating foliage. The next item is some framing tape. A lot of people think that this is actually gum tape, but it's actually framing tape. I'm not actually stretching my paper, I'm just taping it to the board, and it creates a nice white border afterwards, but also sticks to your board. But I do use that on my gummed block pads as well, not to stick down, but just to create a lovely white border. I also like to use an HB pencil. It's not too soft. I don't like anything softer than a 2B, and I don't like anything harder than an H. So this is perfect for me. It doesn't smudge and it doesn't scratch the paper. I use plastic rubbers or erasers instead of putty rubbers because they get a little bit smudgy, and I like the plastic ones. I also use spritzer bottles. You can get these from your local pharmacy or chemist, and it's quite nice for keeping your paper wet or for lots of yummy techniques as well. So I usually have that on standby. If you're familiar with a lot of my tutorials, I use the TWIG. It's just from the garden. I sharpen it with a Stanley knife, but you could also use a pencil sharpener. It's great for creating small thin lines and textures and for painting branches. To the right there you can see a tube of Winsor Newton Designer Gouache Permanent White. I use that a lot in my tutorials for different techniques, but also for corrections. I use a lot of masking fluid in my tutorials. I use the pot variety, but also the ones that come in pens, and I use my TWIG a lot to actually apply it. Now you don't have to run out and buy masking fluid, but what it does, it reserves the white paper. So if you have a very complicated flower or lots of buildings and things like that, you can mask them out, let that dry, and then paint over the top, and the paper is protected by the masking fluid. And at the end of the painting, once the paper is dry, you remove the masking fluid and you've got the white of the paper reserved. So we're getting to the nitty gritty now. Here's my palette. I have lots of different palettes. This is just one type of palette. You can start off with a large white dinner plate and take it from there. You don't even need to buy one. But if you do decide to buy one, you can start out with a cheaper white plastic one, or you can go to the porcelain or metal palettes. It's up to you. So next, brushes. I like to tell my beginner students small, medium and large, and you don't even need the small one. You could use your TWIG and just have a medium and large. I like using round brushes, and these are the black velvet silver brushes. This is a size 14. It's a lovely brush and holds a lot of paint, and it has a beautiful point. The important thing is that they are soft. You don't use a bristle hair brush because it will disturb the paint underneath, as watercolour isn't permanent. There are lots of different brands out there. I'd rather you buy one good brush than a pack of 10 cheaper brushes. that may shed their hair and don't have good points and certainly don't hold the paint and don't flow properly. You may need a larger brush to wet the paper and paint larger areas, so I recommend either a synthetic brush that I've got in my right hand, which won't be as expensive, and that's a flat 1-inch brush. The middle brush is a Sable 1.5-inch brush, a little bit more pricey, and the one on the left on the end there is a pony hair brush by Winsor Newton. It's a round mop brush, holds lots of water, and you can really wet a large area with any of these brushes. The paper I like to use is 300 grams paper, and I like to obviously put this framing tape around the edge to leave a lovely white border. I've used the back of an old watercolour pad, but you could use an MDF board as well. The 300 grams stops the warping and the buckling as well. I try not to use anything larger than a 9x12 for my demonstrations. And I really like Saunders Waterford Arches paper and Winsor & Newton, and I like to use rough, a knot surface as well as a hot press surface. A rough is really nice for textured landscapes, as is a knot surface, but hot pressed is nice for detailed flowers and also some of the abstract paintings I do in watercolour. So my recommendation for beginners would be a 300 grams knot surface watercolour pad, about A4 size or a little bit larger. I love the gummed blocked pads. This is an example here, and it's got the painting of my latest tutorial, but it's all gummed around the edges except for this one part here, which when you've finished your painting you can slip your palette knife or a flat knife in and remove the paper, but it stops a lot of that buckling and warping of watercolour paper, especially when you use a lot of wet washes. A lot of different companies do these, and they come in the knot, the rough and the hot press surfaces. I've saved the best till last. I'm using here as an example the QOR watercolours. I bought this set recently. I bought a couple of sets, and I just wanted to talk about the basic sort of colours that I think you should go out and buy. The most important colour for me are the 3 primary colours. That's the yellow, the blue and the pink. This is Hansa yellow, ultramarine and alizarin crimson, but you could use lemon yellow or a cadmium yellow, permanent rose or alizarin crimson, ultramarine or cobalt blue, and then you can start thinking about some extra colours, and I would recommend a cold blue like Prussian, or in this instance Phthalo blue, and a warm red like cadmium red, or in this instance Pyrrole red light. I think it's also important to have a brown. This is a mid brown, it's burnt sienna, and I recommend this to most of my students. If you can't get hold of burnt sienna, I recommend burnt umber. And finally, last 2 colours, this is Naples yellow, but I do recommend having either a yellow ochre or a raw sienna or even a quinacridone gold as your earthy yellows. And if you want to have a grey, you could use indigo or Payne's grey, or mix ultramarine and burnt sienna together to get a really nice artist Payne's grey. So I really hope you found this useful, just all the sort of materials that I use in my tutorials, but also the ones I recommend mostly to my students that I've been teaching for a number of years, those sort of go-to beginner watercolour materials, the ones that you're going to get the most benefit out of. I wish years ago someone had advised me in the same way. If you would like a full list of these, just click show more, or to the right of the video, at the bottom of the video, just click the down arrow. It will take you to the description where I will have a full list of all the materials I use in my YouTube videos, and also where to buy them. I've got Amazon links and Jackson's art supplies links. So if you'd like to purchase any, why not check those out? If you like this video and you'd like to see more like it, why not subscribe to my YouTube channel, and you'll get updates of my latest videos. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. I really hope it's helped you decide which materials that you need to buy, and maybe saved you a few pennies as well. If you would like to see longer, more informative tutorials with lots of tips and techniques, why not think about joining my Patreon channel membership? Details about this will be in the description below. Any questions, please put them in the comments section below, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. Thanks again for watching. Happy painting. Bye for now.